Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out on this very hot evening. I hope you have air conditioning. I don't, but I have a fan, so it'll cool me down as we chat away. Not so bad as the daytime. Yeah, so we've got representatives from the development, and I'm going to introduce Christine McQuaig so she can introduce her team. We also have the planner from the city, and that is Laurel McCrae. And I believe many of you have talked to her in the past during the stage for the application. So we'll listen to Christine and Laurel for a presentation, and then we'll go to questions right after. Most of it will be questions. I believe the presentations are quite short, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, thanks, Christine. Should I give it to you first or Laurel?
I'm good to go first, Laurel, if that's all right with you.
All right, that sounds good.
All right.
Right,
so good evening, everybody. As Councillor Kavanaugh mentioned, my name is Christine McQuaig. I'm the planning consultant working with the developers for the Bayshore Residences site. Along with me on the call tonight is Patrick Bisson from Hoban Architecture. Thanks, Patrick. And then we also have Steve McCoffey from WSP, who are the engineers on the project. We also have Rick Carrion and Coleman Ney from Lashley and Associates, who are the landscape architects. And we have, I believe, David Hook is on the call as well, who is our transportation consultant. And from the ownership group, Kingset Capital, we have Henry Poon and Mark Garber. I believe Jean-Francois from Ivanhoe Cambridge is also on the call as well. So I'm just going to quickly, I don't believe I've forgotten anybody. So that's pretty well our team here tonight. And I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. There we go. Everybody can see that? Perfect. So as Teresa had mentioned, most of us are familiar with the project. We did go through a zoning and official plan amendment last year that was approved towards the end of 2020, and no appeals were filed at that time. So we submitted our site plan control application for this project. So as I mentioned, brief overview, the official plan and zoning were approved. The site plan control application was submitted at the beginning of May. The proposed height, which you are familiar with from the zoning, remains the same. The unit count is in a range between 500 and 560. This unit mix is sort of still in flux. The detailed floor plans are still being designed. So in terms of the total breakdown of what types of units, we still don't fully have that nailed down just yet. The facade, again, is a evolving design process, which we're really getting into at this stage. And most notably, most of the project has stayed relatively the same. A lot of the visuals, will not be a surprise to you if you were following along with the zoning and official plan amendments that took place. We will note that a lot of detailed landscaping has taken place, and especially the front yard area has been revised a little bit in accordance with the urban design comments that we received previously, as well as staff's comments as well. So I'll just take you through that a little briefly. So this is the site plan that we submitted for our site plan control application. Obviously, there's quite a bit of detail on this plan, but generally what I wanted to draw your attention to in terms of the front yard changes is the reorientation of the front visitor parking has sort of been grouped. So it's not split in half by a pedestrian walkway. We've pushed the walkway so that it's, abutting a greener space and takes you into the site from that way. And you'll be able to see on the colored landscape plan that I'll show you just how that really plays out. Again, the elevations haven't changed. We are going through more detailed design development in terms of facade, materials, colors, etc. But the overall form isn't going to drastically change from what you've seen. As you know, with the zoning approvals, we are tied to that schedule that was approved. So that component won't have major drastic differences. And these are some of the previous renders that we've been working with that, you know, will likely influence our design as it develops and moves forward. The pedestrian connection, of course, to the LRT is still being tied in at the level 2. We have been engaging with the city in terms of the LRT station floor plan layout so that we know, you know, exactly where this is going to be tied in. So that component of the project is definitely moving forward. Again, this is another, you know, the elevation that you would have seen before from the zoning amendment. We haven't entered into, like I said, that detailed facade design just yet, but that's an ongoing process right now. And then they're just waiting for it to clear up. So this is the biggest change that we've seen in submitting the site plan control is really the development of the detailed landscaping concept. So you can see it, there's a lot of green, especially coming around the multi-use pathway. You're seeing the connections to that pathway. You're seeing where the trees are going to be located, how that pedestrian experience coming off of the street is working. So the entire sort of drop-off area we've identified as more of a hardscaped experience as opposed to asphalt, just to really ensure that it's a bit more pedestrian focused in this space. And of course, you can also see that we're advancing towards some design on that upper amenity space on the podium. So that's really the only changes that have majorly taken place is that sort of advanced landscape detail for our site plan control submission. And this colored drawing really gives you a sense of what we're trying to go for this site. And, you know, like I said, because there's not a lot of changes that have taken place, it's just a brief presentation to really get us into the front of this process for site plan control. We're at the very beginning. We've just submitted. We haven't gotten any comments back from the city, so this meeting is very well timed to receive your comments and questions and suggestions. And so at this point, I will. Oh, apologies, that didn't work. I'll turn it over to Patrick Beestone from Hoban Architecture if he has any additional comments that he wants to add on to this.
Thanks, Christine. There's not too much to add other than, as Christine mentioned, we are heading for a June 24th UDRP submission for a July 7th review at the Urban Design Review Panel. So as she mentioned, we're refining the design currently, and potentially with some of your input, we can adjust some of the things as we move forward. But ultimately, as she mentioned, not a whole lot has changed, and we've remained fairly consistent with what you would have seen at the rezoning application. Over to you.
Yeah, so that more or less concludes, I guess, our portion of the presentation. Laurel, I don't know if you want to jump in now and sort of just go over the overall process, kind of moving forward from this point at the city.
Sure, thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. I feel like I recognize a lot of your names from the previous process we went through for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. So Christine did a really good job of the overview of pretty much where we're at. So they've submitted their site plan control application. We're just about at the end of the official comment period, which ends tomorrow. However, we do accept your comments throughout the process. So if you haven't sent them to me, please do so as soon as possible so that I can summarize public comments and concerns and formulate a response to provide back to Christine and her colleagues. Christine mentioned that we haven't given comments yet. I'm still waiting on various internal and external agencies to provide comments to myself so that I can put together a fulsome response to give back to Christine. So that being said, I haven't heard from many people, and it's possibly you were waiting for this meeting, so it's pretty great timing. In the next couple of days, try and get some of your comments and thoughts together and send them on to myself. I can put my email in the chat there for those of you who don't have it. It's also located, I think, on Councillor Kavanaugh's website under her development section, as well as on the city's website, the development application search tool. So where we'll go from there is we'll send comments back to Christine. Christine and Patrick both mentioned that they have to go to the Urban Design Review Panel. So that's another process we'll have to go to in just under a month now if they make the July deadline. And then we'll have to provide a response back to the city on the comments they receive from the city departments, external agencies, as well as the Urban Design Review Panel. And it's possible we'll have to go back and forth several times until the city's satisfied that all of our concerns have been addressed, as well as yours and any of the councillors' comments that she'll provide as well. Once we're comfortable with approval, we'd prepare what's called a delegated authority report. We'd send that off to Christine and to Councillor Kavanaugh for concurrence. So in that report, it basically gives a synopsis of the application, as well as a host of conditions that the applicant must meet in order to register a site plan agreement. Once if then when the councillor and the applicant concurs, we provide approval, and then we move into the registration phase where our legal department will prepare the site plan agreement. So that's it for now. I think Councillor Kavanaugh would really like to open this up to questions, so I'll turn it back over to the councillor, and I'm here for the duration of the meeting to answer questions as well.
Thank you very much, Laurel. We're already getting some questions. I have one. In terms of the Urban Design Review Panel, can you tell me again the timing of that?
Yeah, so we're submitting, or we're planning to submit our submission by June 24th.
Mhm.
And Christine can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe our review date is on the 7th, July 7th.
July 9th.
So likely the July 7th hearing. As I understand it, the UDRP is currently scheduling their meeting sort of over a couple of days. So whether it's that date or around that date, that'll be determined once they receive the file and create their schedule.
Yeah, and that is publicly available because people can attend it by Zoom
Yes.
if they wish. Okay, and of course, the information is available after. Thank you. Okay, I'll get to questions. What happened to the committee consultation? The committee consultation committee? The consultation committee?
I can take that one. I assume, Bill, you mean from the direction to staff that came from Councillor Kavanaugh at council?
Yes.
How we're supposed to have community consultation. So because the application is subject to public consultation, it went out on circulation. So we've asked for the community's feedback through circulation. And as well as this meeting, Councillor Kavanaugh is holding this community meeting for everyone to attend and provide their feedback and to have a discussion. So in my opinion, we're meeting the direction by having this meeting, and Councillor Kavanaugh, I'll defer to you if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And Ian is asking, it was recommended by Planning Committee that the developer engage in the public consultation prior to site plan control application. Why did this not happen?
Laurel, I don't know if I believe that's tied to your previous response, but it was our understanding that the consultation component would occur throughout the site plan control process, not prior to the process, because we kind of went from having the zoning amendment and then kind of rolled that right into our site plan control submission, and the consultation component was going to occur throughout the site plan control process. That's my understanding of the direction from staff or from council.
Right, so it's kind of twofold. There were two parts that direction was given to staff from council. And the first one was prior to the site plan application being submitted and deemed complete, it was only encouraged that the applicant host a public meeting with residents in the community. It was not required. The second was to work with the ward councillor to secure an appropriate venue. So that was only encouraged. The things that were required through the direction were to schedule a community information session, which is what we're having tonight. And then there were several items that had to be considered during the site plan control process.
Okay. The MUP, or the multi-use path, paralleling the city sidewalk along Bayshore Shopping Center driveway seems redundant. Is there a way to work with the city to just have a MUP or so little more green space instead of pavement?
I can respond to that. The proposed location of the multi-use pathway, which is the darker gray that wraps around the eastern edge of the site, was a requirement from the LRT group. That is their desired connection that takes them into the main LRT access for that Bayshore station. I think the reasoning was the city sidewalk has different standards and regulations than a MUP would. The MUP allows for more inclusivity in terms of various modal forms than the city sidewalk would. So they they both contribute in terms of accessibility and access, depending on where you're going. So that's my understanding of why there are those two components. I don't know if Laurel, you can add on to that at all.
No, not much more to add other than and you'll know more about this than I would. Was it a requirement through LRT and previously before you applied for the OPA? I think that's what it was. So it came directly from LRT before any the LRT office, before any applications were submitted. And I mean, prior to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. I don't know that it's necessarily redundant because the MUP is also going to connect further to the west along Fergus Lee's property and over into Graham Creek. So it's going to connect into our larger pathway system, whereas the existing sidewalk does not.
And I also saw the follow-up question with regards to, can the sidewalk then be removed? That would be a request from the city at this point. Typically in areas of high pedestrian activity, I don't believe the city likes to see sidewalks removed. But again, Laurel, I would leave you to comment further on. I don't believe the sidewalk can be removed at this location.
No, and I don't think we'll ask for it to be removed. They serve the MUP, the multi-use pathway, and the sidewalk are serving two different purposes in this instance. So we will be keeping them both as far as I'm concerned for now. We might have comments regarding them up, and I'll reach out to Christine to ask, or maybe you can answer, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, is the exact location for them up set in stone with your agreements from stage 2, or is it flexible to be moved a little bit to the east, or we can work things like that?
Yeah, I would defer that comment to Mark Garber because he was involved with the earlier negotiations with the city in terms of easements and all that sort of thing, but I'm quite certain the location is fairly static at this point. Mark, are you able to comment on that in terms of your earlier discussions with staff?
Yeah, I can't offer much more insight than what you've already said, which is what they wanted. So, if there is a city process to look at revising that, we're receptive to cooperating and collaborating on that. But.
Yeah, and maybe I should, sorry, I wasn't looking to remove it. I know that it's part of the agreement. It's more if we would move it over so you have like a strip of grass there, would we move it over to pair it more with the sidewalk so we don't have sidewalk grass MUP, because what will really happen to the grass? Anyways, that's not here or there, but the MUP does serve a different purpose, so we won't be getting rid of the MUP or the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for you, Laurel. What would have triggered a secondary plan called by exceeding 12-story limit or buildings on a non-arterial road if towers didn't?
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds regarding this question because this would have been with the last process for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. We're more here to stick to the details on how the site will develop. That being said, they did do an official plan amendment to remove that requirement for a secondary plan for a 12-story building. The overall policy speaks more to the larger community of Acorah Village. This was, and it's further detailed in my report, where this is a standalone parcel that is owned by one property owner, whereas the balance of the lands is in Fergus Lee's ownership, and there's multiple properties where we would see that more along the lines of a secondary plan process or something similar. So for this one, it was a single parcel looking to develop with 2 towers. That was more or less straightforward. So that's why we didn't ask for a secondary plan for one parcel.
I know this has been a question that's come up many times with the concerns of the community, since they see this as a pattern setting trend in terms of this building. So I understand why they're asking this question.
Sure.
What happened to the working group committed by the councillor to work with the developer? When will all this be formed and how will it be populated? Can we still work with the the developer on, maybe have a meeting of a smaller group. This is for
Yeah.
Chris.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was to Laurel or to me. Yeah, you know, as we had mentioned in the planning committee and when going through the zoning and official plan amendments, we are definitely open to doing setting up a working group. I'm not sure how that would function. I would that's something I guess Laurel and I would have to put our heads together and figure out how that working group would function and how often there would be, you know, we would touch base on that. I haven't been involved in one, so I'm not, I guess I would defer to the city for their direction on how we would set up that working group.
Well, I'm used to them for secondary plans. So this is where they have, basically for a secondary plan, you have representatives of each community association, one per community association, and meet to discuss, you know, what's in front of them. We did this at Lincoln Field. So I am familiar that we could do this. So it could be a meeting, and then we were able to do it on site, which was because before COVID. But it would just mean, you know, a few representatives in terms of just, you know, no more than a, you know, a small group. That is the whole point, that they represent others rather than a large group, such as a public meeting like this. So that can be arranged. Okay, thanks. What are the dimensions of the community gardens?
I will defer that question to Coleman or someone from Lashley. Perhaps they would have, I'm assuming by community gardens, you generally mean sort of this area right in here. Coleman, are you able to provide some overall sizes of what those spaces are like? Or Patrick, perhaps.
You're mute. Okay, right now I can speak to the community gardens located on the upper terrace. Those are meant to be raised planters. That's what they meant. Those are typically about 3 feet by 6 feet. But if you're talking about the front end, the depth of some of those planting areas are going to be about 2 meters roughly in depth. And it runs right across that whole facade for the east tower.
And then Rick, what about the rear space towards the south of the east tower?
Yeah, so that would be roughly about, I don't know, about 8 meters down as a length, and then it's varying in width up to the mop. But that, you're right, that's going to be planted with perennials and some trees.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. In light of the extreme overcrowding that is occurring at Andrew Hayden and Dick Bell Park, how do you intend to provide adequate parks for new residents? Oh, both those parks, as you know, Rick, are regional parks. So crowding will come because we're going to have more population across the city. That's for sure. So I don't think that the developer is going to be able to answer. But in terms of the official plan, that's a question to ask. In terms of the Parks and Recreation draft plan, that's a question to ask. And it's a serious question, because we need to keep green. We need to have green. What happened in this case was, in lieu of park, we did a cash in lieu, where we're taking where they're giving a contribution to Bayshore Park, and it's going to be used to build a skateboard park within Bayshore. So that's how it's going to be used. So it's something new to the community, in consultation with the Bayshore community and the staff, the city staff that work here. That was decided to be a good thing for basically for youth or others, whoever likes to skateboard. But that is what we worked on. So so in terms of dressing Andrew Hayden Park and Dick Bell Park, Yeah, the short answer is it doesn't.
Councillor Kavanagh, I would also add on to the fact that the proposal does meet and exceed the zoning requirements for amenity spaces on the site in terms of the podium level amenity space that we have, as well as balconies. So there
Okay.
is, private amenity spaces and the communal podium amenity space being provided for the residents.
Okay. All right, from Ian, concerns with traffic on Woodridge arising from this development. Success depends on the transportation demand management process. What is the evidence in Ottawa of the success of the transportation demand management process?
I will defer that question to David Hook if he is on the line, which I believe he is. Oh, let me check. Oh, David, there you are. I believe you're muted.
I think you got unmuted now.
Couldn't unmute
You-
myself.
Good.
Oh, there we go.
All right, so I can't comment on the from the city's perspective, obviously, representing the consultant here on the success of transportation demand management. In this particular context, the biggest transportation demand management measure is, of course, the connection to the LRT station itself. And so, this is a truly transit-oriented development, and perhaps outside of the downtown area, one of the best in terms of integration with transit. So the site itself has a number of other TDM measures, which will also contribute to the use of alternative modes of transportation. And also in this specific context, the development has multiple access points directly onto a multi-use path. So there are plenty of components and a lot of different options for residents of this development to use modes other than private automobiles. And so this particular development is poised to be quite successful in terms of transportation demand management, but I can't comment on overall success throughout the city.
And can you just remind us of the ratio of parkings to units?
I believe, and Patrick can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the ratio was 0.46.
Yeah,
Parking spaces.
I was gonna say
per-
0.45, but it's about there.
And I should add that around a rapid transit station, there is no minimum parking required other than visitor parking. The city stipulates a maximum parking so that developments don't oversupply parking in station areas. So this development is quite low compared to what the maximum would be. I think it's 1.75 spaces per unit.
Okay. Yeah, so people, if they move here, they have to know they're not getting parking. Most people would have to know that. Kate is asking again about getting rid of the sidewalk. I think that was dealt with, Kate, but I appreciate your point, and we can talk to the city about that in terms of the overall effect. Have you studied the impact of additional stormwater on the peak flows in Graham Creek? What happens with the next development?
I'll defer that comment or question to Stephen from WSP. Is he muted?
Hi, this is Connie, Teresa's assistant. What's Stephen's last name?
Coffney?
Okay.
She just wants to make sure she gets the right person there. There we go.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so part of typical site plan application requirements from the city, we're limiting all stormwater discharge from the site down to pre-development conditions. And so there's going to be no increase in peak flows from the site.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In terms of the next development, I think Laurel can tell us that each time there's a development, this is looked at. Is that correct, Laurel?
Yeah, that's correct. And it depends on when they'll come in. They'll have to rely on the information provided by Ivanhoe Cambridge here, since they're in the door first, to see what they'll be contributing to any type of flow. So their review, the next development review will take into account everything Ivanhoe Cambridge has done.
Okay. Thank you. Reference was made several times to the podium, relieving the visual mass and scale of the two towers. If you adjust the angle of your view, will you see a large unsightly block of apartment buildings? Can you adjust the site of the towers to eliminate this?
So we had looked at several configurations for the tower locations. And what we've come up with was the optimal positioning of the towers to eliminate as much overlap as possible between the towers, so you're not looking directly into the other, essentially into the other building. So if you just go back to the site plan.
There you go.
So let me just draw on here. So you have this section, which is essentially about half of the building that would face into each other, rather than a configuration where you would have, you know, something like this where you have a bigger overlap. And also, just from a site plan perspective, positioning the buildings this way allowed us for a better entrance sequence to the project.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Wind studies show higher than acceptable numbers of the northeast corner of the property at the bus stop for three quarters of the year. How will this be changed?
I'll take that one. I don't think we have a wind engineer on the call in any case, but they will suggest wind mitigating measures to alleviate any unwanted effects. And we'll make sure to implement those moving forward. So we'll take our wind study engineers' recommendations and make sure that they're implemented.
Okay, thank you. Are there storm sewers in Bayshore? It's put in a statement form, but I'm asking.
Yeah, hi, Stephen again. Yes, there are. So we're discharging to the existing. It's a 675 millimeter diameter storm that's on. Like I said, it's on Woodridge, that runs from the east to the west.
So there is a storm sewer system?
Yes. I believe
Okay.
it runs along Woodridge, and then ultimately it does discharge to Graham Creek.
Okay. All right, which is where the concern was in terms of the flow.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the performance of the intersections with Bayshore Drive during Christmas shopping rush at Bayshore Shopping Center?
David, that would be to
I'll
you.
take this. Yeah. We haven't analyzed any peak events or the Christmas shopping season. The scope of the traffic study was reviewed and approved by city staff, and there was no requirement to undertake analysis at that time. However, I should note that because of the transit-oriented nature of this development, the impact of this development on that critical time of year would be expected to be fairly minimal, with 80% or more of these residents expected to use alternative modes of transportation. The vehicular impact on Woodridge Crescent and the study area intersections is expected to be fairly minimal. And at most, during peak hours, you'd see in the order of 40 to 50 two-way vehicular trips.
I would also note too that, if the concern is stemming from the residents of this development potentially going to Bayshore to do shopping and contributing to that, you know, influx of vehicles at that time of year. We do note that the pedestrian connection going to the LRT station, there's also going to, well, there's currently, and that's being kept, is the pedestrian connection from the LRT to Bayshore Shopping Center. So really, the residents of this building will have an easier route than driving, essentially, to access Bayshore Shopping Center through those connections. So that will greatly reduce their need to use a vehicle to get to the shopping center.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think Rick understands that, but it's probably more just overall traffic, because people will drive for other reasons. They may not do all their shopping at Bayshore Shopping Center, and they may have cars and they may be driving around. So there will be increased traffic in that sense. I wouldn't make the assumption that everyone's going to shop at Bayshore. Sorry.
Oh, no.
It's not going to happen. So I think it's just the overall congestion, because people will do different things. So I don't think I would make that assumption. So the northeast corner will be incredibly congested. Pedestrian cyclist vehicles on Woodridge and into the transit and the Papudo, and will become more dangerous. How will this be mitigated? If I'm not mistaken, I don't think there is going to be a Papudo. Is that correct, Laurel?
As far as I know, and there was going to be one on the frontage of the site, and I believe LRT has removed that. It will not be abutting this site anymore, as far as I know.
Yes, okay, that's what I'm understanding. So we can talk about that more. Okay, so next, okay, this is a statement about the storm sewers, in that the runoff empties into Graham Creek and floods all the properties north of the bus transit rapid way during heavy rainfalls. So is this going to be reviewed?
The storm water management component of the site is being reviewed in accordance with the city's requirements and regulations for this particular site. As Stephen McCaffney mentioned from WSP, this particular site has to meet the requirements by the city in terms of post-development flow cannot exceed pre-development flow, if I'm mentioning that correctly. And it does, there is the ability to discharge into the storm sewer for certain events. I don't know what capacity on this component in terms of reviewing the greater issues that may exist in the rest of the Bayshore area. Stephen, I'm not sure if you're able to comment further on that.
Yeah, sort of. Our requirements are to meet the pre-development for discharge for the site, and to control the site itself to equal or better than pre-development. So the implications, the larger issues, because I do understand there are some larger issues, are sort of beyond the sort of the scope of this specific site and this development. Sort of I believe the sort of the Akora village at large.
Right, thank you. I'm just going to whip through them because we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try and get to as many as I can. In terms of Bayshore Park, that would be a city function. Kate, we can talk about that. There's actually not a lot of space. The skateboard park is going to take over an old baseball diamond, so it is tight. But I appreciate what you're saying is giving more picnic space. The multimodal level of service shows failure of the intersections already in a Akora Village area. How are we going to? How's the city going to correct these?
I guess that's for me, although I don't have an answer because I'm not a transportation planner. I can take that back, or if you can email
Okay.
me that question, Ian. I don't know if David, you want to
Yeah.
take a stab at it from a different approach, but I don't have an answer at this time.
Yeah, it's you know, I find in every development application that the multimodal level of service for pedestrians and transit users and every other type of road user is lacking as a result of decades of favoritism to automobile traffic, to be very honest. And so it's not an unusual circumstance for these facilities to be not up to the proper level, but there is the whole concept between multimodal level services having a balance for all users, and often cases they have competing interests. You have to look at the functional needs of the roads to accommodate transit, large transit buses, and so you know, a large curb radii, for instance, is required to accommodate a bus, but it's the exact opposite, which is what's good for a pedestrian. And so there is this balance, and the city is making a headway on improving these bit by bit all locations all over the city.
Okay, the next question is about migratory birds. Laurel, is this being dealt with by the city in terms of overall policy?
Yeah, ironically, the bird-friendly design guidelines went to planning committee the same day that this application went to planning committee back in November. And as such, those came into effect. So all of our buildings higher than 4 stories have to be reviewed under the bird-friendly design guidelines. So myself, as well as the author of the bird-friendly design guidelines, has been taking a look at applications that are applicable and providing comments back to the applicant. But there are notes in the legends that say bird-friendly glass will be used for this development, and we'll go through the guidelines to look for further indication if anything else is required.
Okay. Some comments about the skateboard park. Yes, Bayshore community is aware of the skateboard park, and they're happy about it. Would it displace the community garden? No, it would not. As I mentioned, it would take out a unused ball diamond, and so that is what is happening with that. The traffic study has been considered the impact of terminating the baseline bus rapid transit at the Bayshore station.
I can take that. As far as we know from OC Transpo, the impact of the baseline BRT is that it should have very little impact to Woodridge Crescent because, as we understand, buses will come in off Holly Acres and use the existing Transaway connection to the south of the site to access the LRT station.
Okay. In terms of the proposed, what is being proposed for a local park, I think Christine was talking about the amenities in the building, the terrace, and in terms of the local park, the cash in lieu is going towards the skateboard facility at the park.
Councillor, if I could just jump in for a second, it's actually twofold in this.
Mhm.
The $150,000 that's going to the skate park in Bayshore Park was part of the negotiations for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. Additionally, as part of the site plan control application, cash in lieu of parkland will be required. So it'll be an additional contribution as part of an approval for site plan. So for example, the way we do cash in lieu is it's split up between a city account and a ward specific account. So it's split 60-40, so 60% to the Ward 7 account and 40% to an overall wide city account. So when we determine the value and a number is agreed upon, the 60% that goes into Councillor Kavanaugh's account, she has an existing account right now. She can choose to do what she likes with the money. So One of the residents were asking for more picnic tables and benches. And if Councillor Kavanaugh sees fit to request that through the Parks Department, that's something she can use that cash in lieu of parkland money for. Because this site is so small and we're not asking for a park, and I think I've said this in some previous meetings, we don't want all these little city parks on these tiny parcels. It's not sustainable. It's not something the city's looking to manage. Frankly, we don't have the money to manage all these parks. So we'd rather have the cash in lieu of parkland to put money into our existing parks. If some play structures need to be, revamped, or parks need to be redone, this is where the money stems from. So it's twofold. The 150,000 is already a done deal, and then we'll be doing cash in lieu as part of the site plan.
I don't think there's anything where this is going to come up as well. Thank you, Laura. But we've also negotiated affordable housing in these units as well. And I don't think anyone's going to have a question about that, but just a reminder that is part of, and this is probably the largest amount of affordable housing units the city has negotiated. So that is part of the negotiations with the city. Laurel has more details on that if anyone needs them. What happened to the community's suggestion about putting parking underground and turn the podium into residential units, thereby reducing the height of the building?
Patrick, I'll defer that to you.
Well, I mean, we already have one level of underground parking, and we haven't solidified the podium content yet. We are looking, because we are sitting on not the greatest soils, we're still exploring what the best foundation strategy is, and if that means that the parking should slip underneath the building underground, then that's something we're still looking into. But because the soils are not great, and if the better strategy is to not go further down, then we're kind of obligated to push the parking up in the podium levels. And currently, as it stands, that's where the parking is located.
Thank you. How does a person get from 90 Woodbridge to the LRT station?
So I was just looking at that, and 90 Woodridge is the building just west of our site. Based on my understanding, the multi-use pathway will extend westwards and slip by the parking lot that is at 90 Woodridge. Otherwise, one person could take the multi-use pathway to get to the LRT station and the transit station by there when it's built. Otherwise, you can use a sidewalk and walk around the site and essentially go along here and get to the LRT station.
Okay, thank you. Stormwater management. Who installs the OGS? Who maintains it, monitors its function to assure the 23 liters a second commitment?
I will defer that comment back to Stephen McCoffey.
Well, I'm not as familiar with how the agreements work out, but I think generally this becomes an owner's requirement. So for example, there is the OGS has regular maintenance. I think these are usually in the sort of yearly or more often kind of ranges in order to clean them out from sort of any sort of debris that's collected, and the stormwater, the quantity restrictions, those it's a mechanical device that's inserted in the manhole. It's an orifice plate, and that physically restricts the flow from discharging beyond the designed amount. So very rarely would these kind of things fail, but in general they would be inspected as part of the regular maintenance.
And just to add to that, we do have 2 underground cistern tanks to hold storm events, and that essentially help control the flow out to the existing stormwater management system that is on Woodridge. So that's the way we intend on managing the flow back into the system.
Is that something required, or was that something over and above?
No, it's required, and Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the requirements are quite stringent. I mean, they're based on the 100-year event sort of thing. So they're calculated to manage the large once in a lifetime storms.
And if I can add to, like Laura was saying, when we get to the end of this process, there's something that's called the Delegated Authority Report, and it has a list of conditions. And then following that, we move on to the site plan agreement. And this is essentially the proponent, or the developer in this case, entering into a legal agreement with the city. And as part of that, there would be conditions with regards to various components of the site, including engineering and all that sort of stuff and maintenance. So I imagine, anything that needs to be regularly inspected, there would be components of that into the site plan agreement.
Okay, thank you. And in the OGS, we're using acronyms all over the place just to make sure everybody knows what that is.
Oil and grit separator. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Someone's asking about, and I was thinking we should be careful of acronyms. Did the number of units increase from the zoning approval, which increases the pressure on community services?
So the units that we were identifying on the zoning and official plan amendments, which at the time when we submitted for zoning and official plan amendment, the site plan that's provided is generally considered a non-final site plan at that time, and it was about 500 units. With the site plan control submission, we were showing about 550 units, so a change in 50 units for the entire project, and that's really not a final number. We're sort of still in that design stage for the floor plates and the unit counts and the unit mix. So that's not, it's sort of an influx number at this point. But in terms of what we were showing on that site plan versus this site plan, it was a difference of 50 units.
Okay. Bill is still saying that there is no proper storm sewer system. I think that will have, if you're all right with that, Bill, I think this needs to be looked at in depth, because it's, and we need some more information for you. Can I give that to you, Laurel, to give to the right people who can work on that in answering it? It seems to be a definition issue.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, I understand because Bill lives right there and that water is right in his backyard, literally. It's that creek, so I can understand his concern. Papudo, yes, it is jargon. It basically is a kiss and ride. And so that's where you drop people off. And the stations mostly have it, but there was a decision to remove the one at Bayshore. So, and I'm sure that Christine, you were aware of that. So passenger pickup and drop off, yes. Will the address be Woodridge Crescent address? I think it's 100 Bayshore.
It's currently 100 Bayshore. We are looking, I have reached out to the addressing and signs department at the city. It'll have to be an updated address. I expect it will be a Woodridge Crescent address. We haven't gotten an official address from addressing and signs yet. As soon as we do have that, we'll include it on our updated submissions when we have that information.
Okay. How do you intend to implement a construction with minimum impact to the surrounding areas and roads?
For the construction, the city's has a pretty good set of guidelines and regulations that have to be followed on how construction is managed. And we will obviously follow all of those requirements. Patrick, if you want to add on to that, feel free.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think I've seen a single construction project that hasn't, hasn't had its moments of disruption. I mean, it is a construction project after all, but like Christine said, there's means and methods that the constructor will take upon themselves to ensure that, you know, the proper construction methods are used, and that you know, the streets stay safe and usable. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Why is there only 210 residential parking spaces going for 554 unit complex? So yes, residents will not have parking, and it may seem unfair and unrealistic, but that is actually something the city is encouraging, because they're trying to have it so that less people do have cars. A proposed twin high rises next to Terry Fox has one parking spot per resident. So yes, there's different options, and I've got different ones, Lucas, in the ward where they are providing one for one, and others are not. It's a decision. When you move into that building, you have to make a decision. You're not going to move into that building if you have a car and you can't get a parking spot, because there's absolutely no way you can pull it off. So that's what happens. So it's a lifestyle choice that you'll have to make, much like people downtown who and not to have parking as well. So it's something the city encourages, because the official plan is trying to get more people to use that LRT system. And the other thing that I have asked, and I think you'll agree is necessary, is that there should be some shared driving service or car service, like I'm trying to think of the one that's popular, where you can just borrow a car.
Communauto.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have been seeing that somewhat regularly. What we've been hearing from developers is that companies such as that, they don't want their shared spaces to be located underground. So when developments have very limited surface parking, the applicants are less likely wanting to give up a spot for that. So it's something that we have to work out with each applicant, because it has been increasingly difficult to come to agreements between the three parties of where the spaces would go.
Well,
Not
I
a bad
certainly
idea,
encourage it, because
Yeah.
that is, yeah, I would definitely encourage it. I know people that don't own cars, and that is the reason they don't, because they know they can just borrow the cars and on short term for just going out for an evening and coming back. So it's not like renting a car. It's a much easier process. So I would encourage it. Christine, is that considered?
I know various TDM measures were looked at. I don't recall if that was particularly one of them. David, do you recall from the TDM checklist if that was one of the items that we had looked at?
I was just looking to pull up the checklist. I believe that if a provider was available, that the proponent would be willing to negotiate with them. But
It's certainly something that we can take back and discuss further, for sure.
yeah, what we found in other projects is that it's largely up to the service provider if they're interested, and so there's that aspect of things too.
Well, even with the mall, it's or the broader community, there could be a good number of people that would want one, just not to have to own a car. Okay, so just looking to see, there's a question about, are the apartments going to be affordable? We just talked about that, yes, some are going to be affordable housing, but Christine, maybe you can talk overall on the affordability or price ranges.
I don't want to get ahead and speak, for the developer. I'll leave that to Kingset Capital to comment on. But we are providing 45 affordable units as per the City of Ottawa's definition, which is different than the CMHC definition. And I do believe that you know, many of these units will also meet the CMHC's definition. At least that's my understanding. I haven't looked at the numbers recently. Mark, did you want to speak about that a little bit more? I know this is something that KingSett Capital has obviously discussed at length, so perhaps you can give a little bit more information on that component.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to offer at this point. You know, we did agree to provide 45 units and, you know, between the two towers to be affordable, as Christine has described. You know, how they'll be, you know, where they'll be located within the two buildings and so forth is to be determined, and down the road. Like, I'm not sure when we'll know that. But it's something that we feel strongly about. We think it's actually very important. It's important that, you know, affordable housing be provided alongside market housing, as opposed to it being something separate and distinguished, or, you know, put to a separate entrance. So.
All right, thank you. We're going to have to wrap up because it's 7:30. I just want to say that we are going to look at having a meeting with a smaller group. And I invite people to put their names forward. We'll have to work among ourselves, though, because we can't obviously have a large group. And we've discussed this before. So I think there was some understanding of that. So, and then we can meet with the representatives here to discuss some of those issues. I know you're interested in the parking and other things. And in terms of the next steps, I believe that Laurel said that at the beginning, but can you just wrap up with that for next? Laurel?
Sure,
about,
Councillor.
approval.
Sorry, Councillor Kavanaugh, you were kind of
You're breaking up.
cutting up a little bit there.
Yeah, Connie just sent me a note saying it's breaking up. I'll turn off my video just to see if it helps make it stronger. But generally speaking, the next step is site plan application, and it's delegated authority. So it could be taken back to planning committee if that is a possibility. If it can be worked out, then there would be no need to. But those are the options. So we'll get together. We'll talk about a next meeting with a smaller group, and people can discuss that with myself, and we'll work with Christine on the size of the group, and Laurel will likely be involved as well. Anyway, I think that was a productive meeting. I think that a lot of questions got answered. Maybe not totally fully, but I think that we'll send back those more detailed questions, more technical questions, and get more thorough answers. But I appreciate all the comments. It was very helpful, especially to hear from everybody. So thank you very much for taking the time to come out tonight. And thank you to Christine and her team for answering the questions, and Laurel for working with us on this planning. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the evening and stay cool.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.